Dot.
Ah, dot? Non, dot, c'est juste there.
Yeah.
Très bien. Et ça, ouais.
So for the dot. Yeah, it's good.
Position, traduire.
Il a mis un point là.
Yeah, you can.
Oh, yeah.
It's okay, we can get some time to comment.
I'll just leave this on the side.
This microphone is for the question after.
Right.
So
You're a volunteer all the day?
I'm a volunteer only from 3:30 to 5 something.
Okay.
2 seconds.
Okay. Each time you have to propose. We will try to be each time here when there is a changes between two speakers. As you have to pass the microphone for the people who wants to question at the end of the speech.
Yeah.
Decide them to speak well on the microphone and
So,
with a loud voice. So, oui, alors? Ouais. Ouais.
sorry.
what's you talking about?
Okay.
You talking? No, I'm just the helper. Okay, who's
But
Yeah, the Axie.
building.
Je crois que c'est un 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah, exactly. When are we starting?
Now in a few minutes is here.
Okay, it's not.
It's here.
Romain doit être en haut à mon avis parce qu'il n'est pas avec nous. Donc je vais lui envoyer un texto. Ouais, aussi. Ok, je lui envoie un texto. Vas-y. Si je reviens pas à temps pour le micro, je parle bien fort et qu'il le colle.
All right. I can begin. Great. So, welcome everyone. Thank you all for coming to the Axie Infinity Play to Earn presentation that I have here. My name is Aleksander. I'm one of the co-founders of Axie Infinity. And for those of you who have no idea about what we're making, well, every Axie is a unique digital pet, like an ERC 721 type of token that can be used in multiple games. The most expensive one of which has sold for over $15,000, and we're using Ethereum for ownership of these game characters. So far, we've released a few games, breeding games, similar to what CryptoKitties has. We have had an idle battle game, which we released early on in the middle of 2018, which has now actually been sunset due to, well, we put a lot of the gameplay on-chain, which didn't really make a lot of sense from a user experience. And now we are releasing a new card battle game, which is available in alpha now. Playable both on Android and iOS if you own Axies. So, about the company, it was founded early on in 2018. We're a 25-man team based out of Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam. I'm Norwegian though, but I moved and changed my life to Ho Chi Minh City some time ago. We've sold game characters like Axies and Virtual Land for a little bit over $1.3 million so far. And our players have traded for about $1.4 million on our own in-house marketplace. But Axie Infinity is a lot more than just these numbers. So we're creating actually a community around these game characters and been focused a lot on that since the beginning of the game. So our players are artists who make amazing art, like you can see behind me. They create digital art and also physical art, which they've actually sent to our office. They also make games on top of these permissionless assets. So it took a little bit of time, but we actually realized that due to the permissionless nature of non-fungible tokens, it's actually perfect for multiverses and the ability to use Axies or use NFTs in multiple games. So we saw this happen quite early, and this really was an interesting development and actually led to a lot of design choices later on in Axie Infinity. There are also fans who make their own leagues in our game. So they make the Axie League, for example, which is a community-made effort, and now also lately they've created their own guild inside the game, which is called Team Leaky, which is an interesting thing to see so early. But best of all, they're diehard fans who even take Axie Infinity tattoos. And this is something that you can't really buy for money, and this is also why we've been able to partner with some of the biggest companies that are actually working within the blockchain space right now. So I'm telling you this because distribution of games is very important. And when we're partnering with, for example, Kakao, who are making the Clayton blockchain, which I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with, but has a lot of usage in Korea, means that we can reach a lot of users there once the game has reached a polished state. Same goes for EthCC, and now lately Samsung actually used Axie Infinity as one of their poster childs in their recent Ethereum SDK, which they released a blog post about. And of course, MakerDAO, who are sponsoring various tournaments inside the game, and we're integrating DAI in multiple ways. So for example, the item that you can see here, there it is, behind me, is a specific item that you could only get if you had a CDP open and you had drawn some DAI from that CDP, then you were able to claim an item for a specific time. So the most difficult one to get, you actually had to have a CDP open with over $15,000 drawn from it. And what these companies realize is that making a blockchain game right now is very, very hard. I mentioned a little bit of the team. We are based in Ho Chi Minh City, but our key strength is that we have engineers who have backgrounds from Google and PayPal and really understand how important it is to connect the blockchain to actually the games. If you can't actually do that, then, well, you don't have a chance to succeed, and we've seen multiple games fail at this. When it comes to incentive alignment, so one of the important things about when you're making a blockchain game is how do you align the incentives between the players and the developers. Our growth lead, Jeff, has background from Yale with a focus on central banking and monetary theory. And me, well, over the past 15 years, I've played at the highest international levels in Warcraft 3, Dota, and Dota 2. So together we really understand what it takes to succeed in this nascent space. We found product market fit within the crypto space, and our goal now is actually to move ahead and make the market bigger for everyone. But a little bit of how we met so far. This is a CryptoKitty, of course. You all know this one. Our team actually met playing CryptoKitties, which is pretty interesting, and a lot of people don't really understand how that happened. Well, the real strength about CryptoKitties was the fact that there was such a great community that actually gathered around that product. It wasn't really much of a game, but the ability, the amount of people that gathered and wanted to build something on top of this was truly astounding. So we met playing that game, but felt like something else was missing. How can we take these game assets and use them to the next level? So that's how Axie Infinity actually was formed. And that's why I actually changed my life, moved to Vietnam, and then guess what happened? Well, great, the Scourge. As you guys are probably all familiar with, early on in 2018, there was a massive amount of hype about all decentralized applications, different kind of games. Everyone was going to become a millionaire, a lot of hype. And then, well, it pretty much died out. A lot of people really didn't know how to make games, and the addressable market was much smaller than people actually thought. But what actually led to the Scourge? Now, this is where it gets interesting. I've borrowed this graph from Union Square Ventures, which is the infrastructure and app cycle, and how it actually keeps going. And this is actually where we are right now. So the infrastructure, of course, was at a point where you aren't, whenever you try to pushing for something, you get shut down by the infrastructure, which is basically the blockchain. This again led to a lot of VCs actually losing faith, a lot of investors losing faith into what was happening inside the blockchain gaming space, because all of the money was then again flowing into the protocols. All these Ethereum killers, all the people who actually thought that they would capture all the value at the protocol level. We believe in Axie Infinity and in other dApps that a lot of the value will actually be captured at the dApp level, at the protocol, at the application level. But early on, in the middle of 2018, nobody actually realized that because they didn't really know how to design good tokens and align incentives. And I think this is really a big key for why we had this massive Scourge and a massive amount of projects that were going out of business. Because if you only have coins that don't really make much sense, so you have this product where you have a token which actually is not even tied into the product at all, it's supposed to be this payment currency or something, it doesn't really make much sense at all, at least in my opinion. So then we start looking at product market fit. I said a lot of products had actually lost its way. They didn't find product market fit, but what about the rest of the decentralized application space? Well, DeFi, of course, last year, one of the really massive hits with over $1 billion in locked value, I would say, recently happened, as you all know. Without a doubt, product market fit, at least within when you look at the amount of volume. So, okay, they might have it. What about the gambling and gaming dApps? Well, for gambling, it's been stuck at pretty much the same amount of users for a really, really long time now. About 2,000 to 3,000. It's a very easy use case, a very easy thing to see. Well, you can have, when everything is on chain, things are transparent, so it makes sense to put gambling on the chain. But it's not really enough to actually get to these millions of users that we need to have. So what about games? Well, CryptoKitties first. Now, My Crypto Heroes is without a doubt the leading beacon of games. Japanese game, very much Japanese. They have about 3,000, 4,000 users every day. But it's not exactly great. It's not exactly the millions of users that we need to succeed. We need to make the market, the addressable market, bigger. So I think we all agree that there hasn't really been a breakout game yet. So what's next? Well, A New Hope, Darwinism at Work, washed out all, well, not all, but almost all of the bad projects at this time. And we can really start seeing that the projects who actually managed to get the funding, who managed to actually build a solid token economy in some way, well, they are starting to kind of make something tangible, make something fun, which of course is what games are all about. So in Axie, let's see if this, turn this a little bit lower. In Axie, this is our new mobile card game application. As you can see, this is an adventure mode where I'm going to be playing against some monsters here. So our focus in 2020 is actually polishing this game, making sure that it makes sense not only from an economic perspective, but that the game is actually attractive so that we can start targeting a mainstream audience. And that, well, since we released it, it's still not available for play to earn. The only way you can play this game right now is still if you need to own Axies, you need to have MetaMask, you need to have all that stuff. But once we are ready, we're going to activate free-to-play Axies, and at that point, the game is hopefully going to be exploding everywhere. But before that, we need to polish it, and we need to reduce the friction. In this talk, I don't have too much about the technical aspects of what's happening inside blockchain games. But in short, I'm going to address it a little bit. Ethereum doesn't really work well for games. The only thing that actually works for games in Ethereum is the ownership of very expensive assets. So if you're a game developer and you have, let's say, some assets that are worth maybe $20,000, then yes, it makes sense to actually use Ethereum for ownership. But if you want to scale it, you need to use a layer 2 kind of solution, like, for example, optimistic rollup, Loom network, which we have deployed our land assets on. And there are also Matic, Near, Scale, and then Starkware, who are looking into some really amazing options. But this is what it takes to actually go mainstream. But the most important thing is, of course, making a very fun game. And once you've actually addressed these interesting things like the scalability and also making a fun game, that means that you can finally start addressing a huge market. So the mobile games market is actually 68.5 billion, growing 10% every year. And now I'm not even talking about esports or anything of the like. This is only mobile games. Well, when you look at the DApp space, or the gaming space in general, according to DApp Radar, there are between 10,000 and 20,000 actually gamers who are playing every month. This is so small. And actually, we have about 1,000 monthly active users, which gives us between a 9% and 10% market share. So the growth potential is pretty massive. And our players, well, the average spend for a mobile game is actually $17 every year. Our players spend $200. So it's clear that the ownership of game items and assets make people not only care more, but they also spend more money when they're playing games. So how can we actually break through to the mainstream? In my opinion, it's all about the benefits that the blockchain brings. Not all the amazing features, not everything that a lot of technical people want to talk about, like, oh, you can do all these transactions. No. That's not what it's about. Of course, the ownership of the game assets is the most important thing, because if you don't even have that, then you're just pretty much a normal game. And then you have the aligned incentives. Basically, what's happening in the normal gaming industry is that players are being abused by the game companies. So game companies, they try to squeeze you for as much money as they can, and then you sit and you have a pretty bad feeling after you're finished. In a blockchain type of game where the incentives are aligned correctly, it means that when you're spending money, you can actually extract that money back in some sort, or you are actually happy when you are spending the money, just by the illusion of being able to sell it. And this is also something that I'm sure a lot of people will disagree with me, but I don't think that immutability is the most important thing for blockchain games. Transparency. As long as you have transparency of transactions, that is probably enough. As I said, Ethereum, well, the costly transactions doesn't really make much sense if you have, let's say, 1,000 game items that people are going to transfer among each other. But as long as you have the transparency of the blockchain, of some kind of blockchain, that's verified by maybe, I don't know, it can even be a consortium chain, then that should probably be enough for most players, unless the assets are worth a whole lot of money. But what happens then if you, let's say if you use a consortium chain, or you move all the assets to something like a layer 2, or even something that's not connected to Ethereum at all? You lose all the really cool things, composability of game assets. And by that I mean you can actually interact with the broader ecosystem of decentralized financial applications that is available on Ethereum right now. So our players are actually doing this today. If you play the new Axie Infinity card battle game, like you just saw, you can today farm in-game items like small love potions and Axie Dye, which has been sponsored by MakerDAO, and then you can trade them directly on Uniswap, trustlessly, and then exit into fiat if you want to, or interact with other applications. This is something that's never been possible in games before. If you wanted to trade your game items, or if, let's say that you spent 5,000 hours playing World of Warcraft, you're finished playing that game, Blizzard owns the game items. You don't have anything to say about that. In Axie Infinity and in other blockchain games in the future, you will be able to monetize your time and own your digital identity freely. And this means, well, as you can see here, this is a screenshot from our recent leaderboard. We're now running tournaments. We're now running, I should say, seasonal tournaments. So every 2 weeks, there is a new season running, and the winners of that season, they get a DAI reward. So they're incentivized to keep playing all the time. And there's also random drops whenever they're playing the game. So in this play-to-earn scenario, where let's say we have 1,000 players, how can we, and we have, let's say, 1,500 DAI that we want to deliver to these players? Well, I mean, that's great, because then there is something for these players to actually earn. It's very suitable for small communities, because you can actually do some hype. You can spread the word about the play to earn. And it's a great way to get the initial data for your game. So if you guys are making any kind of games, I suggest finding other sponsors or dropping some kind of token, as long as these tokens are not from a bad project, I should say, because your players will look to you for guidance. The bad thing, of course, is that it's time-consuming to find these deals. Business development with other companies is hard. You need them to understand the benefits that a blockchain game can actually bring. And most of all, it does not scale well. So, well, 1,500 DAI, over 1,000 players, at least there's something to gain. 1,500 DAI when you have 100,000 players, well, it's not so attractive, so to say. The chances of finding any DAI there is amazingly low. So how can we make this actually more sustainable? And this is where it gets really interesting if you guys are considering making a game or just curious about how games are being developed in play to earn. We believe that making a sustainable play to earn is all about the economy and the economic situation that you guys are creating. So there has to be some kind of game as a service. So players need to be able to spend money inside your game. So basically, in our game, they spend money on, or they will be able to spend money on in-app purchases like Axies and land, which we've already shown you that we have a lot of revenue from. And then cosmetics, buying, for example, if you want to increase some leveling of various things, tournaments, if you want to buy into tournaments, some kind of consumables, crafting new items, and then minting new assets. But to actually avoid, like, let's say if you have a token, like, let's say you have a currency type of token, and this token is going to be fluctuating in value. This is something that new players actually don't want at all. Nobody actually wants that. If you want to pay in something, you want to make sure that it's stable. So I suggest pricing things stably in stable currency, and then tying that to USD. And of course, since you are building a game in both on the crypto space, you can accept crypto and also fiat. But the interesting part happens here. All the revenue that's flowing into this ecosystem should actually be shared with the people who are owning the token inside your game. So if you're making a game and you issue tokens, players can actually find this token if they play the game, or if they create art, if they create games on top of your game, for example. So this might sound a little bit counterintuitive, because why would you share the upside with your community? Why would you actually do that? It doesn't really make sense when it's so hard to succeed. That's the opportunity. This is where we can actually disrupt the bigger companies. By opening up the business model with the people who are contributing value to your network, that means that you can build enormous amounts of engagement, enormous amounts of retention, because people actually love your product because they have some skin in the game. This is proven already from just NFTs. And this is now what we want to do with a fungible asset. The reason why we haven't done this before is because it didn't really make much sense. You actually need to have a product in the bottom that works so that you can have this circular economy with sinks, basically that people are spending money. So as an example, if I spend money on buying a new Axie, it costs me 5 DAI, then that DAI is going to be delivered to all the players. If I spend 5 Bitcoin, that Bitcoin is going to be delivered to all the players who are staking and holding our token. And in the end, all of this is going to end up into a more virtual world kind of aspect. So I'm sure you guys are familiar with Decentraland, maybe Somnium Space, Crypto Voxels, a lot of these projects that are building virtual worlds on top of Ethereum right now. On top of, I should say, the blockchain, because Ethereum is not exactly where everything is happening, but a lot of it. These companies believe in an approach where you're building a framework, and then you are paying companies to build games on top of that framework. In Axie Infinity, our approach is a little bit different. We want to provide an amazing game to make sure that people find this universe. So by making the first amazing mobile game, they come into the universe, they play the games that we have available, and then discover the virtual world aspect of what we are creating. And at that point, we can also make a map editor. We can also make SDKs, and we will make it, so that people can make games using these non-fungible permissionless assets. And this is something that, well, we have a lot of faith in because we've seen it already happen in the game. And if we then also have the incentives aligned so that these guys who are making games on top of the platform, making, let's say, a game that has 100,000 users, well, they get tokens and then do revenue sharing with our platform too. So there's been a lot of talk about a decentralized autonomous organization. And in my opinion, this is the way to go for games as well. If you can open up the business model, open up the governance model, make sure that the people who are actually playing your game are the ones who are benefiting, not only the people who are investors, even though they should also benefit. It needs to be more fair. And I believe a decentralized, well, organization at first, because making a game is so hard. You need some kind of guidance. You need a ship captain, to be completely fair. Someone who sets the course, who says that this is what we're going to do at the start, and then, well, progressive decentralization. So if you start very decentralized, like we, for example, did in our game, then probably it will not go too well. Because this is not something that players actually want. They want a fun experience with the benefits of the blockchain. And once you get there, that's when you can actually start to decentralize things more, and that includes the governance of the platform that you are creating. So yeah, that's it for me today. I'm not sure how much time. I guess I have some time for questions if there is anyone that wants to ask me something.
We have 10 minutes for questions.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, first of all, thank you guys for building this amazing project. I love it. It's not a long time I'm aware of it, but I'm playing it, so thank you. I like it. And yeah, I wanted to ask you the same question I asked to a guy earlier who's using the Loom network. Since I'm a holder of the coin, like, what's your experience using it? And like, if you can just share something about your experience with the Loom network. Since you also mentioned it, right?
Sure. So for those of you who are not familiar, I didn't mention too much of the technology stack, but we were actually one of the first projects who deployed land and items on Loom Network. And that was early on in 2019 for a land sale. So far, it's actually worked pretty well. There has been some ups and downs. I mean, it's possible to deploy stuff on Loom right now if you're a new game developer. Whether or not that is the right choice, I'm not completely sure right now. There has been some news among the CEO actually resigned from Loom Network a few months ago, which is not that bullish. So I can say that we're looking into different options also for Axie. Nothing is 100% confirmed, but I think it would be wrong to say that Loom might be the best choice right now. But it certainly works, but something more like deploying on an EVM type of chain, and then being more open to kind of porting over to something else that might be better in the future is probably the right choice. So I actually think that there's nothing that suits the developers' needs right now in the way that we need it. Maybe in 6 to 9 months, I mean, we already said that, but sadly, it's just like things take so long in this space to get there. All right. So then I think I'm done. Thank you.
I guess I'll take that. Hi. You're the next speaker? Yes. Cool. Have this microphone.
Let me get ready.
Yeah.